Before we get started in Dharma talk, please join me in invoking the Buddha's name 3 times. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Dear Venerable Teacher, dear Sangha, good afternoon. Continuing our discussion on the Dhammapada, we are on chapter 2, verse 25. Chapter 2 is on earnestness, apumada vaga. Verse 25. So as usual, to continue discussing this verse, we'll go into the story that it was given in respect to the occasion, and then of course the commentary and our most fun part, the discussion. All right, so I'll read the verse first, and the verse goes, by sustained effort, earnestness, discipline, and self-control, the wise man may make for himself an island which no flood can overwhelm. By sustained effort, earnestness, discipline, and self-control, the wise man may make for himself an island which no flood can overwhelm. This verse was given on the occasion of, there were 2 brothers back in the Buddhist time, Mahapantaka and Chulapantaka. The older brother, Mahapantaka, he became a disciple of the Buddha first. He would accompany his grandfather to go to see and listen to the Buddha's sermons. And so he ordained as a monk first. And then shortly after, or after some time, he became an arhat. He attained full enlightenment. And soon after, his younger brother, Chulapantaka, also ordained as a monk as well. However, the younger brother was a little dull-minded. He wasn't the brightest bulb in the packet, but he nonetheless had the resolve to be a good monk. But he had trouble memorizing or knowing any of the discourses. He had difficulty learning one stanza. Stanza is a set of verses, or a verse of 4 lines. So he had trouble memorizing a stanza of 4 lines, and he couldn't memorize it in 4 months. The stanza was simply a praise to the Buddha. Because after he would memorize the first line, he'd start the second line, he would already forget the first line. And so he was kind of dumb. The reason he was dumb is because in previous life, he was also a pretty good monk. However, he would make fun of those that were also dull-minded. And so he unfortunately created that karma that caused him to be reborn again as the object of his you know what I mean, right? So anyway, so on one occasion, there was a rich donor in town that offered to give alms to all the monks, right? Give their meal for the day. And so he invited all the monks to go. And it was Mahapantaka's job to rally all the monks and get them to go. At this point, this was pretty early on in the monastic order, so the number of monks weren't huge yet. And so he gave the list to the donor of all the monks that were coming, minus his brother, Chula, because he didn't think that Chula was a real monk, because he couldn't memorize 4 lines of a gatha, of a stanza. And so he excluded him. But Chula unfortunately heard this, because he was eavesdropping or something, and became very discouraged, became very doubtful of his practice, of his abilities to become a good monk. And so he kind of just moped around for a little bit. But later on, when all the monks and the Buddha went to the donor's house and sat down, they were getting ready to have the meal, and it is traditional that the host would kind of pour a type of holy water in order to kind of initiate the service. Right after the meal, they would give a Dharma talk. And so as he was pouring the water into the bucket, as the offering to the Buddha placed his hand over the bowl and stopped the water. And he asked, "Are all the monks present?" And Mahapantaka, who's in charge of getting and rallying all the monks, said, "Yeah, everyone's here." The Buddha was like, "No, there's one monk left at the monastery." But prior to them leaving, though, to the donor's house, the Buddha knew that Chulapantaka was feeling down. He knew that he was feeling discouraged and wanted to leave the monastic life. Because at the time, Chula was getting ready to just go back as a householder. But sensing that, the Buddha gave him, sat him, made a new seat next to where the Buddha would sit at the monastery in order to give Dharma talks, right? And so pretty much like up front. The Buddha laid down a new cloth for him to sit down, and the Buddha gave him a word to repeat. Raju Haranam. The Buddha told Chula to just sit and recite Raju Haranam, which literally just means taking off impurity or removing impurity. And he gave him a white, clean cloth. And he said, just rub the cloth together and recite Raju Haranam, Raju Haranam, Raju Haranam. And so after a while, of course, even though the cloth is clean, your hands aren't always clean, right? There's sweat, there's dust, there's stuff in the air that get onto the cloth. So after a while, the cloth started to get dirty, started to soil. Upon seeing the cloth changing from clean to dirty, kind of sparked this dormant good karma in Chula that allowed him to see the impermanence in that moment of something that was clean and pretty to something that's now changing to something dirty and impure. And so that stagnant or that dormant spark kind of was able to be released. Upon recognizing that spark, that's when the Buddha on the other side of town, or wherever he was, put his hand over the bowl and said, "No, there's one more missing." And so he sent someone to go fetch Chula. And through the Buddha's supernatural power, he told Chula, as he contemplated the impurity of the cloth, he recited to Chula that it is not the piece of cloth alone that is made dirty by the dust. Within oneself also there exists the dust of passion, raga, the dust of ill will, dosa, and the dust of ignorance, moha. And this is the ignorance of the Four Noble Truths, at least. So only by removing these can one achieve one's goal and attain sainthood. So the Buddha here is reciting the three poisons, ignorance, greed, and anger. Right? These are the poisons, these are the defilements, this is the dirt that causes us to be stuck in this realm of samsara, this realm of suffering, dukkha. And so upon hearing or realizing that truth of the three poisons, Chula became enlightened. And when one supposedly becomes fully enlightened, they have these supernatural powers, right? You don't know yet. I'll let you know when it happens. Okay. But anyway, so when the Buddha sent someone back to the monastery to fetch Chula, because of Chula's supernatural power, emanated 1,000 replicas of himself, right? So there's 1,000 looking chulas in the monastery. Do different things. Some were sweeping, some were cleaning, some were washing their robes, some were just sitting and meditating, etc., etc. And so the messenger, when he saw that there was more than just the one monk missing or left behind, he went back and told the Buddha, Venerable, there's not just one monk there, there's 1,000 monks there. And so the Buddha told him, well, go back and ask for Chula Pantaka. So he went back and said, Venerables, I'm looking for Chula Pantaka. And one after another, all of them said, I am Chula, I am Chula, I am Chula, I am Chula. So it's like, okay, well, I didn't help. So the missionary went back to the Buddha and told him, they said they were all Chula Pantaka. So the Buddha told him, well, go back and see who's the first one that says, I am Chula Pantaka, and that's the real Chula Pantaka, and get him and bring him here. So he went back to the monastery and he said, I know you're all Chula Pantaka, but who's the first Chula Pantaka? Or something along those lines. And so once everyone said, I'm Chula, but he noticed who's the first one that said it, he was like, okay, that's the real one. And once he grabbed that monk's robes, all the other illusions disappeared. And he took Chula to the donor's house for the alms. And because he was thought to be dull by all the other monks who knew that he couldn't even memorize a stanza of 4 lines, we're surprised when the Buddha told Chula to give the Dharma talk after the meal, because it's customary to give a Dharma talk as gratitude for the meal. And so all the other monks were like, are you sure about that? That's a little suspicious. That's a little sketchy. But they were all surprised when Chula gave them a Dharma talk, specifically on what he needed to become enlightened, which was the three poisons. And so after everyone went back to the monastery, and Mahapantaka, the oldest brother, questioned the Buddha and asked, what on earth just happened? Right, and that's when the Buddha recited the verse. By sustained effort, earnestness, discipline, and self-control, or effort, heedfulness, discipline, and restraint, or training and restraint. So by sustained effort, earnestness, discipline, self-control, the wise man may make for himself an island which no flood can overwhelm. The Buddha gave this verse to let the monks know that your ability to become enlightened, or your ability to become, or to suffer and to go through hardship and chaos and whatnot, is at your own accord. No one is responsible for your own suffering or your own happiness. The Buddha, even though Chula Pantaka was dull-minded, even the Buddha couldn't change that for him. He couldn't undull his mind for him, right? He can only guide him to let go of that dullness. And it's only through that guidance and through Chula's own efforts was he able to overcome the obstacles that prevented him from becoming enlightened. So Buddha is reminding us that your ability to become enlightened, to become happy, to become unhappy, to do whatever it is in life that you need to do, is in your own hands. There's no one controlling you. There's no one giving you or taking away opportunities, right? And so when we create an island that no flood can overwhelm, right? When we recite the Heart Sutra, for instance, the Heart of Prajna Paramitta, the mantra at the end is Gate Gate Paragate Parisam Gate Bodhi Swaha, which translated is something along the lines of gone beyond the shore of suffering to the shore of enlightenment, right? And so the Buddha here is always telling us that I am simply giving you a raft. This raft is the tools, the necessities that you need to end your own suffering, to become enlightened. So it's your responsibility to take that information, to take those guidelines, to take that raft and cross over the sea of suffering, which is our daily life, to the other shore of enlightenment, right? That other shore of enlightenment is this island. Because once you're enlightened, there's nothing that can unenlighten you, right? And so you are an island that no flood can overwhelm. But no one can force you to get onto that raft. No one can force you to the other side. This raft is a one-person raft. And there's no room for others, which means that no one else can help you steer the raft. No one else can help you push out the raft. No one else can help you row the raft. So it's your own responsibility. It's your job and your job alone. And so the only way to do that is by having sustained effort, by having earnestness or heedfulness, by practicing discipline, which is in this case the 5 precepts or more, and by self-control. Self-control here is discipline. Discipline is one of the most important factors in Buddhism, because since Buddhism is a mind-centered religion, right? Again, your happiness and your unhappiness isn't 100% in your own control. And because of that, you create the suffering or the happiness that's in your life. It's your own projection, your own perceptions, your own ego, your own ignorance toward things that is causing the suffering. Something may happen in your vicinity that you believe is suffering, but it can only be suffering to you because you see it as suffering. Someone else may not see it as suffering, right? And so if we're able to get on this raft, and this raft is all the tools that we need, essentially the Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, right? That is the very basic, very foundation of Buddhist practice. With those 2 foundations alone, the Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, you have everything you need to become enlightened. When the Buddha gave his first sermon to his first 5 disciples, he gave the discourse on the Dhammapada Parvavatana, the discourse on the turning of the wheel of the Dharma. The turning of the wheel of the Dharma was simply the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path, and all 5 of the disciples became enlightened. But Buddhism has a plethora of discourses, of sutras, thousands of them, literally thousands. And there are thousands because Buddha was such a great teacher that he taught different people different ways, but teaching the same teaching. But he taught according to how the assembly or how the audience would be able to respond and to understand. And so if he knew his audience were uneducated or dull to some extent, he would teach them at a level that they would understand, that they would be able to comprehend. If you went to visit the kings or the high ministers and whatnot, people who are educated or well-versed in religion or practices or whatever, he would teach them at the level that they would also understand, not at the dull level. So we have thousands of sutras because we recorded the thousands of ways that the Buddha taught the Dharma. But essentially, everything stems from the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path. If you want to backtrack and make this Dharma family tree of discourses, you'll see that everything goes back to the very root of the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path. That is how important these practices are. And they're important because the Four Noble Truths is simply the fact that it is trying to convey to you that in life there is suffering. The reason for your suffering is your attachment to desires. That there's an exit plan here. There's a contingency plan to escape. How do we escape it? By practicing the Eightfold Path. And then we have the Eightfold Path. Nothing in the Eightfold Path and nothing in the Four Noble Truths directs to saying, this person is the cause of my suffering. No. In every single truth and every single path, the finger is pointed to yourself. You're happy because you made yourself happy. You're unhappy, you made yourself unhappy. Why are you unhappy? Because something didn't go your way. You're unhappy 99% of the time because your expectations were not met. Right? You go into work, you work hard, you've been there for years, you're expecting a promotion. Someone else who just came in last week got the promotion. What happens? You're angry. You feel betrayed. You want to start slashing someone's tires. Reporting to HR, I don't know, whatever, right? Now you're unhappy. Why are you unhappy? Because your expectation of that promotion is gone. And it's the same thing with everything else in life. In relationships, especially. You have an expectation of how a significant other should be talking to you, treating you, doing things, not doing things, right? We have an expectation of how people should be, how should they act, how they should respond, how they should live their lives. And when those expectations are not met, or they go against those expectations, whose fault is that? Yours or theirs? Yours, because their expectations are not your same expectations of your expectations are not their expectations. And so when we're in situations where that occurs, if we're able to be mindful and aware that, okay, I'm in a moment of anger, I'm in a moment of suffering, I'm in a moment of anxiety, whatever the feeling or emotion is, be mindful and be aware of that. Because if you're able to be mindful and aware of it, then you can pinpoint exactly what's going on and why it's happening. It's not important that you know that it's happening, right? It's important to know that when you're feeling angry that you become aware, that you be mindful and say, hey, I am angry, or this is anger, right? That's the first step in the practice. Great. You've made something that 99% of people cannot do, which is pinpoint the feeling or the emotion of what's happening when it's happening. But once you pinpoint and say, this is anger, now your next step is to ask yourself, why? Because once you ask yourself why, and you give yourself an honest answer, it's going to be because expectations were not met. Something happened that you didn't want to happen. Something went against your views or your perceptions or your ideas, right? And once you are honest with yourself, hopefully, and you see that, that'll give you that aha moment, right? There's going to be a momentary spark of enlightenment there, because you've pinpointed and you've directed your mind to the cause, the source of your suffering. And that's pretty much the whole reason of our practice, is to find these sources of suffering and why they're there. Because once you're able to pinpoint and see why they're there and how they're there, and you're able to take them out of your life, right? I always give the example of, if once you figure out what the reason is of something that you're suffering, and for instance, a specific person, now that you know that they are causing you discomfort in life, they are causing you heartache, headache, whatever it may be, you have the source of that suffering. You have something tangible. You have something that you can use, right? So it's now your job to do something about it. You can either distance yourself from that person, unfriend them, leave them, whatever it may be, right? The decision is going to be up to you. But once that obstacle is removed, now you have one less piece of suffering in life. You have billions, millions of sufferings, right? So one taken out doesn't seem like a whole lot, but it will over time, especially during our meditation practice, especially during meditation, that when you're meditating and you're finding yourself constantly distracted or overwhelmed, or the distraction of someone, let's use a person in this example, someone that's constantly coming up all the time in your meditation, clearly they're an obstacle, right? So once you've identified that obstacle, did something about it, plucked it out, now the obstacle is no longer there. You have one less suffering in your practice. which may not seem a lot, but over time you'll notice that your chaos starts to simmer down a bit. It's not an overnight thing, okay? Trust me. But it is important to do that, to recognize that, to see that. Otherwise, if you just acknowledge that this person or this thing or this emotion or this place is the problem, and you just leave it at that, and the problem is still there. You've identified the problem, but you didn't do anything about it. Right? So it's important to identify, but it's also important to do something about it. The same thing with our practice. You can read all the books and all the sutras you want. You can know every verse of line there is. But you're probably just as dumb as someone who's never read a book, but is a better practitioner. Because they're doing something, whereas you're just acknowledging. So in this verse, the Buddha is reminding us, right? Because even in the prior verse, verse 24, the Buddha stated that if an earnest person is energetic, mindful, pure in conduct, if he acts with consideration, self-restrained, lives according to the Dharma, then his glory will increase. And when your glory increases, and you maintain that sustained effort, earnestness, discipline, and self-control or practice, then you're creating an island. You're creating that island of enlightenment. You're creating a Buddha land. But it's not just going to come up there, right? Islands don't just magically appear. If they do, then it's aliens. But if it doesn't, that means it's man-made. And no one can create that island for you. You may be able to see other people's islands, people who are well-practiced or have high attainments, realizations, or enlightened people. You may be able to see their island. But you won't be able to travel there yourself. They won't be able to take you there. They won't be able to help you create your own island. They can help you create your raft, right? This is where the Sangha comes in handy. The Sangha, which is the community of practitioners. Because you can do a lot on your own. You can read, you can study, you can practice so much on your own. But there comes a time when that is not going to be enough. Which is why it's part of the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. Because the Sangha is important. The Sangha is the glue that's going to keep your practice intact. It'll help you not fall into wrong views, for instance, or wrong ideas of the practice. Okay, I have 2 minutes. So I'm going to reiterate what I said last Dharma talk, is you have to put in the work. If you do not put in the work, nothing's going to happen in life. And this is common in everything else we do in life. If you go to school, if you're just lazy around and don't practice, don't study, and don't do your homework or do your stuff, you're going to fail. The only way you'll pass is by doing the work. Yes? Same thing at work. You have to go and do the job. If you don't do the job, you get fired for not doing your job. Right? So it's the same thing in our practice. You have to put in the work. Otherwise, you're just sitting here, listening to me, agreeing, but not doing anything about it. Okay, let's stop. Questions you have. concerns, emotional outbursts. And you can use the mantra that the Buddha gave Chunda, Raju Haranam, Raju Haranam, taking off impurity or removing impurity. Yes, ma'am. Magic. I'm kidding. The Buddha he was very educated, right? Because he was a prince. So he's very educated. He knew multiple languages. He perfected the study of the Vedas, the Hindu Vedas. And meditation was already a common practice at the time, right? With the ascetics especially, and the priests, Hindu priests. So meditation was already an established practice. And so after he left the palace life and went out to seek the answer, right, he met with a few established meditation teachers. And one after another, I believe there was 3 of them, 3 teachers that he went through. But one after another, he surpassed his teachers, right? Because they were only teaching about most of them were teaching about like the jhanas, the mental absorptions, right? These are high levels of consciousness during meditation called the jhanas. And so he would get to each level according to the teacher that he was with and surpass them. So he's like, okay, well, clearly this well-known teacher doesn't have the answer. Because he knew, even though he was highly attained in meditation, he knew this was not enlightenment. Because you'll just know. You're still suffering, right? And so he knew none of these teachers knew what they were doing or knew what they're talking about. They didn't have the answer for him. And so after his teachers, and he practiced asceticism for 6 years, he came to the realization of the middle way, Madhyamaka, middle way, where the extreme austerities of being an ascetic were not the answer, because he would starve himself. The extreme luxury of palace princely life was also not the right path either. And so the right path was somewhere in the middle. Somewhere in the middle is accepting that in life there's suffering, that life is impermanent, that most of our perceptions and views of the world are false and illusory, that our ego is the master of our mind, not the other way around. And by letting go, by severing these hindrances, these poisons of ignorance, greed, and anger, then you come to the final realization, the open-mindedness of enlightenment. I can explain what enlightenment is to you. You have to ask someone who is enlightened. But when you are enlightened, you know you're enlightened. There is a sense of complete calmness and clarity, and being able to see things as they are, which is kind of like the motto in Buddhism, seeing things as they are, which is seeing past the delusion and the ignorance and the false perceptions that we give to things in life, right? I always use the example that if we're meditating, for instance, and someone opens the door, our habit thinking, thought process is asking, who's at the door? Why are they late? Why are they disturbing my meditation? Who do they think they are? Service started 40 minutes ago. They're late, right? These are our habit thoughts. what we're doing is making up a story for this person. We're making up excuses as to why they're late. Maybe they couldn't find the parking spot. Maybe they didn't know where to go. Maybe this or that. Blah, blah, blah. Right? We're making up things that are not true. That's part of our sufferings because we make up those imagery. Right? That's part of our perception. That's part of our expectations. And so an enlightened person, or someone who is well practiced, when that same situation happens, instead of thinking of all those excuses and stories, they will simply notice that there was a sound, or that someone entered the door. And that's it. There's no making up a story, there's no making up excuses, there's no making up why or who or where they're coming from. There's no addition to the simple action of the door opening or the sound being heard. And so if you're able to sit in meditation and do exactly just that, sound, door, dog, AC, airplane, right? Simply acknowledge what is going on around you without creating any additional information, without creating a story, without creating excuses, right? When you're able to do that, now you're seeing things as they are. You're seeing past the illusion. You're seeing past the deception of what our mind will naturally do. And so when you consistently do that, you train your mind to do that, then you start getting closer and closer to that enlightenment. And eventually, it'll be like a spark that will naturally just happen. Everything you see, hear, touch, feel, taste, you don't create any additional stories to it. It is what it is. That makes sense. Right, yeah, because he asks the story, well, why do we age? Why do we get sick? Why do we die? And it was those questions that triggered, okay, there has to be a way out of this, which is what led him to leaving the princely life and finding that answer. And that answer is the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path.
And so the whole life of his work is not just he done it in one day, whole 40 years or something like that.
Yeah, it took him 29 years. Is there a short question? Because I have 2 minutes. Again.
How important was his experiences along the way? Because he had questions to these things, and then he sought certain practices to try to find a solution, and figured out when he reached the mastery of those things, he found out they were not the way. He kept going on. He kept having experiences. So he came to a conclusion, which was came to the middle path, the aha moment he had. And one of the things that I know he did was he starved himself to a point of brink of death. And there was a story where somebody came to him with food and had said a healthy mind is nothing without a healthy body. And he opened his eyes and he was like, thank you. Now I'll tread the middle way, the middle path. So how important was his experiences? Because those experiences obviously led to a conclusion, obviously led to a realization. You know what I mean? So how important is the Buddha's experiences along
Well, I can ask you the same thing. How important were your experiences that led you here? If you did not have those experiences, would you be here? Would you still be here? So same thing with the Buddha. He had experiences that led him to a specific place. Without those experiences, he would never be there. Without going to school, you'd never graduate. Without learning skills, you'd never have a job. Without learning how to walk, you wouldn't be here, right? So your experiences are important, as long as they're beneficial. Yes, sir.
So, judgment. Judgment is something that is baffles me. And if we're talking about these monks, the two brothers, well, one brother was having a judgment about the younger brother. And he's on his island, little brother's on his island. The older brother thought he knew what this little brother's island was, and it was not. So in other words, he made a judgment that he was not where he needed to be or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And in practice, we don't make judgments like that. So he was in error by making that judgment.
Right. Judgments would fall under the ignorance umbrella, the three poisons. Because what is a judgment? A judgment is you see something that is against your expectations, right? That's why you're judging them. Why are they wearing that? They shouldn't be wearing that. They shouldn't be saying that. They shouldn't be doing that. Why? Because you believe that they are those opposite things. But if you didn't believe those, then you would never have the opportunity to judge.
So the Buddha just said he just needs a different kind of instruction to be able to like walk.
Right.
Like the story of the one monk who was sent to a monastery to teach, and all he did was sweep the floor all day. It turned out that was his lesson. I sweep the floor all day, keep the floor clean.
That was that same monk.
Same monk.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sweep, sweep. Sweep, sweep. He was sent in the nunnery to teach them. And all he would do was sweep. Sweep, sweep. No teaching. Not a single word was uttered at the nunnery. Sweep, sweep, sweep. And the nuns went back to the Buddha and said, Venerable, this was the most profound teaching we've ever come across. Because what was he doing? He was sweeping. It seems so mundane. But what is sweeping? What are you doing when you're sweeping? Right. You're removing dirt, right? Rajaharanam. Taking off impurity. Taking off impurity. So our minds, if you think of our minds like a mirror, right? And right now, as we are normal beings, our mirror is foggy, right? As if it's steamed up because you just got out of a hot shower, for instance, right? And so we have different ways to clean up this mirror. At first, maybe we use our wet towel, right? That's leaving behind streaks. It's leaving behind little lint pieces. It's not completely clean yet, right? That's one tool. Then we use our bare hand, which removes some of the lint, but it's still streaky, right? And then we use a clean, dry towel, for instance, maybe, and remove the streakiness, but now there's still a little bit lint behind. And so our practice is the same thing, right? All these tools that we're using to clean our mirror mind is helping us remove the dirt that's obscuring the enlightenment. And so if you practice these tools, if you use these tools correctly, then you're wiping away that fog slowly and slowly. Eventually, you see clearly, and you penetrate the ignorance, greed, and anger that you have, and see your true self, which is your Buddha nature, your own Buddhahood. So as soon as you clean up that mirror and you see yourself, bam, fireworks of enlightenment. There's no fireworks, but mentally they are. Okay, we're out of time. So if there's any questions, again, more questions, please feel free to ask after the service. But we will go to transferring the merit and then go to chanting. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. For any positive karmic action we've accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merit to all sentient beings and wish them full enlightenment.
So the general practice, inviting the bell. Buddhist
speech and mind in perfect oneness, I send my heart along with the sound of the bell. May the hearers awaken from forgetfulness and transcend all anxiety and sorrow. Listen, listen, this wonderful brings me back to my true home.
Incense offering. In
gratitude we offer this incense to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout space and may it be fragrant as earth herself, reflecting our careful effort, our wholehearted mindfulness, and the fruit of understanding slowly ripen. May we and all beings be companions of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. May we awaken from forgetfulness and realize our true home.
Opening verse. The incense
in the censer now is burning, all the Dharma realm in every place, auspicious clouds appearing, our sincere intention thus fulfilling, as all Buddhas now show their perfect body, homage to the incense cloud canopy, Bodhisattva and great Bodhisattvas.
Verses for bowing, we bow together. Om
to the eternally abiding Buddhas, the supreme Dharma and sagely Sangha throughout the Dharma realm and the realm of empty and 3 periods of time.
Homage
to the fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha, Manjushri, great wisdom, Bodhisattva, universal great conduct, Bodhisattva, all Dharma guarding Deva Bodhisattva, and the glorious mountain assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas.
Homage to
Amitabha Buddha in the land of ultimate
bliss,
Avalokiteshvara, great compassion, Bodhisattva, great strength, Bodhisattva, earth store, great vow, Bodhisattva, and the assembly of great pure sea like Bodhisattva.
please sit down. The great compassion mantra. Namo
Great compassionate Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo great compassionate Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo great compassion Buddhas and Bodhisattvas.
Namo Natrayaya, Namo Arya Balokite Savaraya, Bodhisattvaya, Mahasattvaya, Mahakarodikaya, Om Sarvaravaye, Sudanadasya, Namo Mamarya Vishwaram Dava Namo Narakindi Mahavaswami Sarva Arhato Shubham Ajayam Sarva Sattva Namo Vastava Namo Bhagamavitato Tadyata Om Avaloke Lokate Karate Hiri Mahabodhisattva Sarva Sarva Mala Mala Mahi Mahiridayam Koro Koro Karmam Doro Doro Vijate Mahavishate Dara Dara Dirinishvaraya Shala Chala Mama Vimala Mukelehi Ehi Shina Shina Asham Prashari Vishwa Vishram Holo Mara, Holo Holo He, Sara Sara, Siri Siri, Soro Soro, Bodhiya Bodhiya.
Bodhaya, 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 Maitreya, Narakindi, Vishanina, Vayamana, Swaha Siddhaya, Swaha Mahasiddhaya, Swaha Siddhayoge, Shvaraya, Swaha Narakindi, Nara, Swaha Sira Simha Mokaya, Sarva Mahasiddhaya, Swaha Chakra Siddhaya, Swaha Padma Kastaya, Swaha Narakindi Vagalaya, Swaha Mavadi Sankaraya, Swaha Namo Ratnatrayaya, Namo Harya Varokite Shvaraya, Swaha Om Siryanto Mantrapadaya Swaha.
The Dhamma Bodhi
is bringing morning light in concentration. My heart is at peace. A half smile is born on my lips. This is a new day, and I vow to go through mindfulness. The sun of wisdom has risen, shining in every direction. Noble Sangha, diligently bring your mind into meditation. Namo Shakyamunaye Bodhaya, Namo Shakyamunaye Bodhaya, Namo Shakyamunaye Bodhaya.
Verses for opening a sutra. The unsurpassed,
profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in hundreds of millions of eons. I now see and hear it, receive and uphold it, and I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true me. Namo Shakyamuni, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.
touching the earth, the one who
bows and the one who is bowed to are both by nature empty. Therefore the communication between them is inexpressibly perfect. Our practice sense is the net of Indra, reflecting all Buddhas everywhere. Own person reflects in all Buddhas, to whom with my whole life I go for refuge.
Offering light in the
10 directions, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, to whom we bow in gratitude.
Teaching, living
the way of awareness in the very midst of suffering, and Sakyamuni Buddha, the awakened one, to whom we bow in gratitude.
Good thing
Through ignorance, awakening our hearts and our minds, Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of great understanding, to whom we bow in gratitude.
Well, working mindfully, working joyfully for the sake of all beings. Samantabhadra, the Bodhisattva of great action, to whom we bow in gratitude. Responding to suffering, serving beings in countless ways. Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of great compassion, to whom we bow in gratitude. Seed of awakening and loving kindness in children, sprouts, and all beings. Maitreya, the Buddha, to be born, to whom we bow in gratitude. Showing the way fearlessly and compassionately, the stream of all our ancestral teachers, to whom we bow in gratitude. The Dhamma is deep and lovely. We now have a chance to see it and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning. Of the Paramita, the Bodhisattva Avalokita, while moving in the course of Prajnaparamita, shed light on the five skandhas and found them equally empty. After this penetration, he overcame ill-being. Listen, Shariputra, form is emptiness. Emptiness's form is not other than emptiness. Emptiness is not other than form. The same is true with feelings, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Listen, Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They are neither produce nor dish, neither defiled nor immaculate, neither increasing nor decreasing. Therefore, in empty, neither form nor feelings, nor perceptions, nor mental formations, nor consciousness, no eye or ear or nose or tongue, nor body or mind, no form, no sound, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realms of elements, no interdependent origins, and no extinction of them, no ill-being, no cause of ill-being, no end of ill-being, and no path, no understanding, no attainment, because there is no attainment. The Bodhisattva, ground in Prajnaparamita, find no obstacles for their minds, having no obstacles, liberating themselves forever from illusion and realizing perfect nirvana. All Buddhas in the past, present, and future arrive at Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Therefore, one should perfect understanding is the highest mantra, the unequaled mantra, the destroyer of ill-being, the incorruptible truth. The mantra of Prajnaparamita should therefore be Te Gate Paragate gate parasamgate bodhiswaha gate paragate parasamgate bodhiswaha gate paragate parasamgate bodhiswaha.
Invoking the Bodhisattva's name, we invoke your name.
Avalokiteshvara, we aspire to learn your way of listening in order to help relieve the suffering in the world. You know how to listen in order to understand. We invoke your order to practice listening with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will sit and listen without any prejudice. We will sit and listen without judging or reacting. We will sit and listen in order to understand. We will sit and listen so attentively that we will be able to hear what the other person is saying, and also what is being left unsaid. We know that just by listening, we already alleviate a great deal of pain and suffering in the other person.
We invoke
your name, Anjushri. We aspire to learn your way, which is to be still and to look deeply into the heart of things and into the hearts of people. We will look with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will look with unprejudiced eyes. We will look without judging or react. We will look deeply so that we will be able to see and understand the roots of suffering, impermanent and selfless nature of all that is. We will practice your way of using the sword of understanding to cut through the bonds of suffering, thus freeing ourselves and other species.
We invoke
your name, Samantabhadra. We aspire to practice your vow to act with the eyes and heart of compassion, to bring joy to one person
in the morning and to
ease the pain of one person in the afternoon. We know that the happiness of others is our own happiness, and we aspire to practice joy on the path of service. We know that every word, every look, every action, and every smile can bring happiness to others. We know that if we practice wholeheartedly,
we ourselves
may become an inexhaustible source of peace and joy for our loved ones and for all species.
We invoke
your name, Kshitigarbha. We aspire to learn your way of being present where there is darkness, suffering, oppression, and despair. So we bring light, hope, relief, and liberation to those places. contact with those who cannot find a way out of their suffering, those whose cries for help, justice, equality, and human rights are not being heard. We know that hell can be found in places on earth. We will do our best not to contribute to creating more hells on earth and to help transform the hells that already exist. We will the qualities of perseverance and stability, so that like the earth we can always be supportive and faithful to those in need.
We bow together. The three refuges. I take
refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and of love. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness.
Dwelling
in the refuge of Buddha, I clearly see the path of light and beauty, and the dwelling in the refuge of Dharma, I learn to open many doors on the path of transformation, dwelling in the refuge of Sangha, shining light that supports me, keeping my practice free of obstruction.
Taking
refuge in the Buddha, in myself I aspire to help all people recognize their own awakened nature, realizing the mind of love, taking refuge in the Dharma. In myself I aspire to help all people fully master the ways of practice and walk together on the path of liberation, taking refuge in the Sangha. In myself I aspire to help all people build fourfold community, to embrace all beings and support their transformation.
Sharing the merit, reciting
the sutras, practicing the way of awareness, gives rise to benefits without limit. We vow to share the fruits with all beings. We vow to offer tribute to parents, teachers, friends, and guidance and support.